expect. We've got a lineup of 3 wonderful speakers. They will give their presentations. As they do that, we'll also have some slips of paper we'll be giving out. If anybody has questions, you can write them down. We'll take like a 1-minute stretch break afterwards and collect your questions, and then we'll reconvene for a panel. And then during the panel, they can field your questions. We've got some questions too. And after that, I would invite you to check out Wonderfill, which is a wonderful zero plastic refillery located in Mount Lebanon. They've got their wares at the back table. They're over by Howe Elementary School, so you can get a chance to check them out. They've got some good holiday gifts. And with that, I'd like to hand it off, I guess, to Abby Lawler-Morris. She's with LeboGreen, and she'll kick off the presentation.
Hello, yeah, again. As Sam said, thanks for coming out because this weather's pretty. It went from, I think, summer to winter in a matter of minutes. So we just, if you're not familiar with LeboGreen, we are a volunteer grassroots organization, environmental organization that's been around for, I think, around 15 years in Mount Lebanon, and we do anything that reduces our impact and climate. We do our big event is Earth Day. If you've been to the Earth Day at Mount Lebanon event, that is like our big event every year. We do some other activities throughout the year, and one of our speaker series, which thanks Sam, who's really spearheaded this effort, and Shayna Bodie, who's one of our members, who also has been really instrumental to this speaker series. And then we have a website if you want to check it out. It's Mount Lebo, LeboGreen.org. You'll find on there, there's a page where if you're familiar with the main park where the bathrooms are, there's a rain garden that's been there for several years. One of our members, Morgan, who couldn't be here tonight, she has actually been working tirelessly to get that rain garden back up to its original glory. And she's been planting all these natives. You can check out all the different plants she's been planting. You can check out more information about past Earth Day events, and as we start to plan our Earth Day event for 2025, we'll start to update the website. You can see all our past speaker series events and a little bit more about our organization. If you're interested in getting on our email list, which we send out, we do monthly meetings, then we send out some about any events, and every once in a while some other interesting things or events that you may be interested in. If you signed up, there's also a spot that you can check, and we'll put you on our email list. I think that's it. So thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing the weather. Yeah. Thank you.
I just want to say welcome all to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunny Hill. Our mission here at Sunny Hill is to create a more just and compassionate community within our walls and beyond. To achieve this mission, we have several active social justice teams, including environmental justice. The very first Mount Lebanon Earth Day took place here at Sunny Hill in 1970. Since then, we have joined with LeboGreen and have participated in their Earth Day. More recently, we had focused on supporting people living near fracking. And to care for our Earth, this year we focused on decreasing our plastic use, and we collected and recycled 1,000 pounds of plastic. It is a privilege, and we are very lucky to welcome our speakers here tonight, and I will take some time to introduce them. And they're here to share with us their knowledge and expertise about forever chemicals in our environment in the setting of the ongoing expansion of the petrochemical industries in our region. Our first speaker will be Dr. Ned Katire. Dr. Katire is a medical consultant for the Environmental Health Project, bringing attention to the health impacts of fracking, plastic pollution, and climate change. Dr. Katire is a Pittsburgh pediatrician. Although retired from private practice in 2017, he remains a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics Council on Environmental Health and Climate Change, and is president of the Physicians for Social Responsibility in Pennsylvania. Dr. Katire's work focuses on the public health and well-being of all passengers on this shining blue ball. Our second speaker will be Moses Wamala, and he is the program director and leads the Plastics Collaborative of Humane Pittsburgh, focusing on eliminating single-use plastic in our area. Moses' experience includes community mobilization and youth empowerment, and working with diverse communities and people and bringing them together to work on a common goal. Formerly a lead organizer for 1PA and a program manager for Action for the Climate Emergency, Moses has a strong background in advocating for social justice and environmental sustainability. And then our last speaker, Michelle Nakarty-Chapkis, as the Executive Director of Women for a Healthy Environment. As the Executive Director, she and her team create healthy spaces for children to live, learn, and play. That is the core of their work. Michelle leads the organization's initiatives focusing on the prevention of environmental exposures that impact public health, with an emphasis on working in environmental justice areas. Her dream for Women for a Healthy Environment is that children can live, learn, and play in a world free of environmental harms. Okay, Dr. Katana.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here tonight. If anyone has trouble seeing the screen behind me, please feel free to move up. So, as Susan said, I'm a pediatrician. Practiced here for 26 years here in Mount Lebanon. Had to retire a little bit early in my career, so this is kind of what I do now. And I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to be here. If I can figure this out without losing a finger, it would be good. So much of the work that I've been doing for the last 8 years since I retired revolves around the upstream activities involved with plastics and petrochemicals. The drilling, the fracking that produces ethane, which is plastics feedstock, and the methane, which powers the whole operation at an ethane cracker factory like the one in Beaver County that's operated by Shell. All to create trillions of tiny plastic pellets or nurdles every year that are used to make all the plastic products that bring us comfort and convenience, but also sickness and environmental degradation and climate chaos. So tonight I'm going to take you upstream, and I'm going to show you that PFAS has a story to tell even before it gets into our plastic products and ultimately into our bodies. But first, I want to remind everybody that we all have a constitutional right here in Pennsylvania to clean air, pure water, and the preservation of a healthy environment. And that constitutional guarantee is not just for us adults, it's for everybody, for our children, our grandchildren, and for generations to come. So the life of plastic begins at the wellhead, and it begins upstream. On the left of this, let's see if my pointer works here. This right there is a traditional, conventional oil and gas well, basically sticking a pipe into a shallow reservoir of oil and gas, and up comes that black gold, Beverly Hillbilly style. But that's not fracking. It's the middle well that you see here, in the middle of this graphic, that's fracking. And what that is drilling much deeper, about a mile or a mile and a half, into the shale formation that exists here. It's the Marcellus Shale formation. There's another formation, the Utica formation under that. Then once the well hits the shale, they turn that well horizontal and continue to drill laterally for several miles more. When the drilling is done, When the drilling is done, they push under very high pressure millions of gallons of fresh water, sand, and tens of thousands of gallons of chemicals. Many of them toxic, many of them endocrine disruptors, many of them carcinogenic. Here are some of the chemicals that are used in fracking. Chemicals include acids and corrosion inhibitors, friction reducers like surfactants. An example of a surfactant is PFAS. A more detailed list of chemicals is on the right. Many of them are known to cause harm to the brain, the liver, the kidneys, and some of them are carcinogens. We know from research conducted by Dusty Warwick at PSR that PFAS chemicals have been used extensively throughout the United States in fracking wells, and that includes Pennsylvania. PFAS chemicals are useful to the oil and gas industry because of their slippery, grease-resistant, water-resistant properties and their heat-resistant properties. These same trends make them useful in firefighting foams, food packaging, rain gear, carpeting, and personal care products. One of the better-known PFAS is Teflon, which is used in non-stick cookware and in medical devices. PFAS is an extremely dangerous class of chemicals. They're systemic toxicants that at extremely low levels can damage multiple organs and body systems. They've been linked to testicular cancer, kidney cancer. They may have a role in the development of breast cancer. PFAS chemicals disrupt the endocrine system, affecting thyroid function, blood cholesterol levels, and fetal and infant growth and development. Studies have highlighted concerns about possible impacts of human reproduction and pregnancy. And there's good evidence showing that PFAS chemicals interfere with how we respond to vaccines. PFAS chemicals have been measured everywhere, in rainwater, everywhere, in rivers and streams, in our drinking water, and in us. Pennsylvania is the second largest gas-producing state in the nation. There are now more than 14,000 active shale gas wells, mostly in the northeastern part of the state, and southwestern PA, right here. There are also hundreds of scattered compressors around the state, as well as gas processing facilities, waste facilities, and thousands of miles of pipelines. This is Washington County. This is how it looked about 4 years ago in 2020. The pink balloons are the well pads. There are many wells on every well pad. The yellow thumbtacks are the compressor stations that cause a lot of air pollution. People who live in Washington County, like me, and are surrounded by this, we're affected by everything, by the well pads, by the pipelines, the compressor stations, the processing facilities, the diesel truck traffic, all of that affects us. The 9th edition of the Fracking Science Compendium contains more than 2,300 citations showing that fracking has never been done safely anywhere and can be done safely anywhere. There's no safe way to frack. Water pollution is a big problem that comes with fracking. There are many examples of contaminated aquifers and streams in Pennsylvania contaminated with fracking chemicals, including PFAS, that are known to increase the risk of illness and cancer in humans. Water can also be contaminated with toxic and corrosive brine, with heavy metals, and water-soluble radioactive materials. Toxic air pollution accompanies fracking. Here are some of the common air toxics that can cause serious health problems: fine particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. The fracking chemicals themselves can become aerosolized. Heavy metals, radioactive substances like radon gas with a half-life, radium-226 with a half-life of 1,600 years in radon gas, and a lot of greenhouse gases. A lot of the same pollution shows up later in the life of plastic. And with the exception of silicone dust, all of these air toxics are invisible, and they make people sick. Fracking is a health crisis. That is what makes fracking so controversial. Dozens of epidemiologic studies, many of them done here in Pennsylvania, show that fracking increases the risk of developing health problems in people living nearby. And not surprisingly, the closer you are to it, the higher the risk. Pregnant women, infants, and children are especially vulnerable. Multiple studies show higher risks of pregnancy complications and adverse birth outcomes when mothers live near fracking. Multiple studies show links between fracking and asthma and other respiratory problems. There are multiple studies now that show associations between proximity to fracked gas wells and the development of cancer in children. A Yale study from 2022 showed a 2 to 3 times increased risk for young children developing leukemia within 1 mile of a fracked gas well in Pennsylvania. Researchers at the University of Pittsburgh last year found that children living within 1 mile of a fracked gas well in Pennsylvania had 5 to 7 times the risk of developing lymphoma compared to children living further away. The Pitt researchers also showed that people with asthma living up to 10 miles away from an active fracked gas well had higher odds of having a severe asthma attack and needing to visit the emergency department or needing to be admitted to a hospital. The risk was highest after the drilling and the fracking were completed. In other words, during the production phase of fracking, which the industry tells us can last for several decades. Another study from Pitt showed poor birth outcomes when pregnant mothers live within 10 miles of a fracked gas well, and was also especially concerning during the production phase. So this tells me as a pediatrician that there's something about fracking, and maybe it's an endocrine disrupting chemical, or maybe it's the stress that mothers feel when they're living around this industry. But there's something that's interfering with the normal growth and development of a baby inside the womb. Now, I live in Washington County. Everyone who lives in Washington County lives less than 10 miles from a fracked gas well. And most of us live a lot closer. So that puts a lot of mothers and babies at risk, and a lot of asthmatics too. Elderly Pennsylvanians who live near fracking are also disproportionately harmed, with higher hospitalization rates for pneumonia, heart attacks, and heart failure. And they have a higher risk of dying prematurely than those who live in areas without fracking. Communities with fracking in Pennsylvania and elsewhere consistently experience increases in crime rates, especially violence against women. The risk for depression, anxiety, PTSD, and mental health conditions is also higher due to the heavy industrial activities associated with fracking, all the land clearing and the heavy diesel truck traffic, the drilling and fracking, all the odors and noise and light pollution that comes with it. The sense of hopelessness and the worry of getting sick or your children getting sick. That adds to the mental health burden from fracking. And because methane leaks from every point of frack gas infrastructure, and a lot of it leaks, from the wellhead to the stovetop and every point in between, including petrochemical factories and ethane crackers, we know that fracking accelerates global warming and climate change, and that threatens everybody's health and safety. So the gas that gets fracked out of the ground in southwestern Pennsylvania goes to the Shell cracker plant in Beaver County, and things haven't been going very well at the cracker plant, if you've noticed. Local residents have been very unhappy with the visible emissions coming from the plant, as well as the odors, the noise, and the light pollution. Shell has violated its air quality permit on several occasions and has been fined severely, although for Shell it's just a slap on the wrist. Shell informs us that other chemicals are being released from the cracker plant, and these can damage the brain and the nervous system, the kidneys, the liver, and other organs, and they can cause cancer. There's good reason why people who are living near the cracker plant are really worried about their health and worried about the health of their children. Nearly all plastic produced today goes into single-use products and packaging, and less than 10% of it's recyclable. You can see here the symbols that tell us what kind of polymers are utilized for each product. Many chemicals are added to the polymers, And in fact, thousands of different chemicals have been used in plastic products. Some chemicals make plastic thinner, others make it thicker and stronger. Some dyes are added to give it color. Other chemicals give plastic fire-resistant properties, especially PFAS chemicals. And as I said, thousands of chemicals have been used in plastics. And interestingly, very few of them have actually been studied for their effects in humans and how they affect health. So we're all learning the hard way about how dangerous plastic is. This is a short list of some of the chemicals commonly added to plastic materials. The table shows what products these chemicals are found in and the known health impacts that can occur from exposure to them. And maybe you've heard of some of them. There's bisphenol A or BPA, the heavy metals cadmium and lead, phthalates, which are notorious endocrine disruptors, PFAS chemicals, styrene, vinyl chloride, which blew up in East Palestine a couple years ago, and others. Chemical additives are not bound to the polymer matrix, and so they easily separate from plastic into the surrounding environment. But like a time-release capsule, the chemicals seep into the air, the water, the food, and into body tissues, becoming a persistent threat to health and well-being of humans and other life forms as they spend hundreds of years or longer breaking down in landfills or loose in the environment. Another big problem with plastic is that it breaks down over time into smaller and smaller units, eventually small enough to enter our bodies and cause even more harm. In the past 5 years, there's been a lot of research that has shown microplastics and nanoplastics, which are really tiny plastics, entering the body and being found in organs. Every organ they look, they find microplastics. And then that's where your risk is for that time-release capsule effect, where once it's stuck in your body, it just slowly releases those chemicals. Plastic is very much a modern problem. I was born in 1959, which is over on the left of this chart. You can see there wasn't much plastic then. More than half of all plastics ever produced have been made since 2000. In fact, 75% of all the plastic on the planet is less than 35 years old. So this has happened on our watch. The rise of plastic in our products, in our lives, in the environment, corresponds to the rise of chronic diseases that we've observed in humans in the United States and around the world. Neurologic disorders like autism and dementia, cardiovascular diseases, environmentally sensitive cancers like breast cancer, prostate cancer, and especially in younger people, digestive disorders, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. Lower sperm counts in males and other reproductive impacts have also been documented during this era of plastics. So, unless we change, some scientists say that by the middle of the century, which isn't really, what's that, 25 years, it's not that long, there's going to be more plastic in the oceans by weight than fish. So this is the choice that we face, planet or plastic, and we can't have it both ways anymore. And looking back, we probably never could. Okay, I think is Moses next.
Hello, everyone. I think we can give another round of applause. Very insightful. And even though I've been doing and researching this, I still ended up learning quite a bit from it, so I really appreciate that. Hello, everyone. How are we feeling? How are we doing? Good. All right. So I'm going to do a quick intro, let y'all know who's standing in front of you and why. And then I'll jump into my presentation. Some of it will be a little bit duplicative, but sometimes hearing things from different people might help spark something. And I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle. So my name is Moses Omalua, and I am the programming director at Humane Action Pittsburgh, currently running the Plastics Collaborative as well as our Youth Steering Committee. And I'm here before you because Sue reached out and was like, hey, would you want to talk about this? And I was like, I mean, I'm I'd love to because we're launching our education series and it feels like it would be really perfectly dovetailed. But also, I don't know that I'm like an expert. Like, we have an expert in the room. I'm not necessarily an expert, but I am someone who cares really deeply about these issues. And as I learn, I like to share what options there are for people. So that's what I'm going to be here to do today. I'm not coming to you necessarily as an expert, but just as a learner, like the rest of y'all, I can tell y'all a little bit about my journey in learning about plastics and getting more involved in this aspect of sustainability and environmental advocacy. So I came into the environmental world primarily from a space of wanting to do more for communities of people that look like myself, who are often victimized by practices that are put in place. We tend to be the people who live the closest to a lot of manufacturing centers and see the impacts more severely. We tend to have the least access to the education and resources that we need to actually do and make the changes that we need. And also, just unfortunately, throughout American history, that's been the case. So that's the space I came into it from. A lot of passion, not a ton of necessarily, I did not come up in this space at all, and so I've been educating myself. But I think that uniquely positions me to be able to talk to what I call the average person, right? The person that hasn't been so deeply enmeshed in this work. I can talk to y'all and sort of help, like, let's wrap our head around what this all means and what all some of these big words and all these things are and how they impact our day-to-day lives. So that's what I'm hoping to do today. We're going to talk about forever chemicals. We've gotten pretty deep and insightful breakdown of what they are. We're going to look a little bit more into our day-to-day lives. What are they? Why are they harmful? And what can we do about it? Right? That's what I'm hoping we'll leave out of this presentation with is what are they in real simple layman's terms? Why are they harmful? What can we do about it? Sounds good? Yeah. All right. So let's jump into it. So forever chemicals are called forever chemicals because they don't break down. They last essentially forever, thousands of years. And this is an issue because we don't want things to stay in our environment for forever, right? We like to have things to break down, to go back into the natural life cycle. That's how things are supposed to be. But unfortunately, because these are synthetic, they were created in a lab, and they were created to be really structurally solid, they last, they don't break down, and that's why they got the name forever chemicals. The other name that is often used is the PFAS, as you've heard previously. And part of the challenge with these chemicals is the fact that they're everywhere, right? One of the challenges, and to your point about plastic, it's ubiquitous, right? And it's the same thing with this. They are in most of our cooking, cookware, any type of water-resistant clothing or like tent or any like outdoor gear is going to have PFAS in it. Firefighting foam, food packaging, this is a really common place for you to find these chemicals. They're super, super persistent and they're very present. That's why they're called forever chemicals. So, a little bit about, we're going to go into the history a little bit more. I'm not a history major, so don't worry, I'm not going to go super in depth, but they basically started in the 1940s in an effort to actually get something that can prevent grease from sticking to your pans. And that's sort of where they came from, and then the applications became endless. And one of the things that's also important to note is that this is not one individual chemical, it's a number of different things. And as we're going to talk about regulation, one of the things that becomes really tricky with regulation is the fact that you can ban one of them, and then they can just jump on to the next, and the next, and the next. And there are hundreds of these, right? So any type of regulation, any type of bills that are being passed, we need to really keep in mind it should be broader, and it shouldn't necessarily be limited to one particular chemical. But it's really widely used in a number of different industries. We've talked about fracking, we've talked about it in the kitchen, it's used in medical practice, it's everywhere, right? And that's because it's resistant to heat, water, and oil, which is something we want, right? That's the thing that's so tricky about some of these conversations is these things proliferated as much as they did because they are useful. They do have at the time when they were, like, my thought process is there wasn't some evil guy in the lab being like, let me go ahead and poison the entire world. It was people who were trying to make life easier for people, not necessarily knowing the impacts. I will say now that we do know the impacts, obviously we need to do better. But just to give that a little bit of perspective as well. So, as we mentioned, started in the 30s, that's when the research started, and then they landed on something in the 40s, where they became really widespread, and then we started hearing talks about the damage, right? The first big case was when a farmer sued DuPont when his cow ended up dying because of drinking the water that had chemicals in it. And we started getting more and more information about the impacts it has on human health and the environment, and that's when some regulations started coming in, where there was some, where they banned the PFOA and the PFOS. But again, unfortunately, one of the things that happens is you can ban one specific chemical, but that doesn't necessarily change the issue, right? Because they'll just switch. Right now, the one that's most commonly used in cookware is called Gen X, and it's still, we don't have a ton of research, but the impacts we can predict are going to be similar to the issues that we're having here. And one of the things that becomes really challenging is how much it proliferated in such a short time. As the doctor mentioned, it's in our air, it's in our soil, it's in the water, it's in our food, it's in our homes, it's in our clothes, it's everywhere. And so there needs to be much more rigorous efforts, and we can do what we can individually. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but there needs to be much more rigorous effort to sort of curtail this from the production side. So, as we were mentioning, where can you find it? Where is it going to, how are you going to be exposed? Drink contaminated water, which is most water, unfortunately. I think they were saying, I was reading that they've tested, and in most places they've tested, they've found some percentages. And the only reason the percentages aren't higher is because we're not testing it nearly as frequently or as thoroughly as it needs to be. So that's one of the major issues, is it is in our water. There is something you can do about that. So right now, the best option for if you're looking for clean drinking water is going to be the reverse osmosis filter that is installed in your sink. I think they were saying it has like it's like 90, 95 to 96%. And also some of the charcoal filters, but they have various results. You need to do a little bit more personal research. The other aspect is in most of our food packaging. And so this is going to be any type of food packaging that is going to be wrapped in plastic, likely is going to have some PFAS to prevent sticking and if you need to reheat and everything like that. And then there's a ton of consumer products, right? Like as we mentioned, the cookware, fabrics, etc. And so we need to be really cognizant of the fact that it is everywhere, because that has to affect our approach to combating it. So this isn't again just like, oh wow, I wish y'all would have told me I had been jumping ahead and I've been a slide behind the whole time. I've been talking to the future. Wonderful. All right, well, there it is. This slide, now that I'm on the right page, this has a number of common spaces where you might find it, and as you can see, it is a wide range of things, right? Right from dental floss. Like that one, I was like, dental floss. Wow. Okay. I had to take a deep breath on that. But it is everywhere. And like one of the aspects too that is deeply personal with me as a parent of 2 toddlers is it's in a number of children's toys as well. And so we are unwittingly, because again, as I told you 6 months ago, I had no clue. You could have put this in front of me, I would have not been able to tell you a single thing about it. And you're very excited to buy your kids toys, to buy the presents. You want them to have the best, you want them to have the colorful, bright, plastic things, and all of a sudden, you start realizing, oh, I'm actually putting their lives in danger. I'm potentially damaging their physical, mental health by what I'm doing. Something as simple as popcorn. That one was another one that broke my heart. I'm a big we can land there is that they're super common. I'm not gonna be able to do as good of a job of breaking down the health impacts, but there are many, and there's still a ton of research that needs to happen for us to even get to a clear understanding of exactly what it impacts and how it impacts. But we already know that there are some associations with a number of different cancers, with your hormone and the way your body regulates hormones. It has had impact. It can impact and damage your liver, kidneys, and it can cause, as the doctor mentioned, reproductive issues, right? And these are severe issues that can impact all of us, and we need to do something about it. And this, just a little bit more in depth, there's this concept of bioaccumulation, which we'll talk about a little bit when we talk about the environmental impact, but it essentially just means that it is something that will continue to compile as time goes on. And the other aspect of it that you so clearly brought out was the issue of the developmental issues, right? Where it can impact pregnant women and the development of the child in their womb. So speaking specifically about children, there's the thyroid disruption, where it can impact the function of their thyroid gland, which can lead to hormonal imbalances and developmental issues. It can lead to liver damage, particularly for children with underdeveloped organs, and you're having a ton of exposure to toxic chemicals. It can have an impact, and it can also lead to developmental delays like cognitive, speech issues, behavioral issues, and physical development delays in children. So not great, right? Like we can all agree, we love for our children to grow up to be happy and to be healthy, right? So we want to make sure that's something that we're doing, that we're prioritizing. And that might mean it's okay for us to not have microwave popcorn if our kids can grow up healthy, right? Like those are some of the things that we sort of start having to now weigh, because it's not so easy to tell people. A lot of you are here because you're already passionate and like you're already advocates in this, but for us to really make effective change, we have to engage and get the average person, the person who doesn't know about this, who's never heard of this, and who needs to care about this enough for them to write to their elected official, enough for them to protest or to go out or to engage, right? And so sometimes you really want to hold that balance up and be like, hey, like I know it's super great to be able to flip your egg in the morning when you do a nice, that smooth flip feels incredible. But cancer's bad, right? So we can sort of start putting these things up to measure and asking ourselves truly what do we prioritize as individuals and as a society and as a culture. So talking about the environment, it's not just the impact it has on us humans, it also has an impact on our natural environment. It also impacts our wildlife. It will, and the challenge with the wildlife, especially when we're talking about that bioaccumulation, is it will travel up the food chain, right? So the same thing happens with microplastics as well, where as certain animals are exposed to these chemicals, consume them as part of their practices, and then are consumed and continue to travel, it will expose in other animals and eventually us, since we are at the top of the food chain and tend to eat everything on the planet, it will eventually get to us, right? So even in a world where you keep yourself completely walled off and you drink only filtered water and you don't have any plastic and you don't have firefighter foam, you don't have any outside clothes that are packed for rain gear, as long as you're consuming something, you're still potentially going to get exposed. And that's not just in animal products, but also in vegetables, because again, it gets in the soil and it can leach into the vegetable products. So this is a huge, huge issue, and it's not a global issue. That's the other thing too about this, that this is a global issue, and again, we see the impacts sometimes much more severely in other countries that are more under-resourced. So that was sort of just what we were talking about there a little bit more broken out, but again, it concentrates as it moves on up, and it will impact our soil, our water, and our wildlife. So, what can we do about it, right? That's what we're here to talk about, right? That's what I'm hoping to engage with you all on. What can we do? Step one, switch. It's not the easiest step, necessarily, right? It does take research, But if you're using non-stick, switch to stainless steel, and you'll have a better cook anyway, to be honest. Like, if you learn how to use stainless steel, it is perfect, and you'll have a great time, and it lasts forever, and you look like you're fancy and you know what you're doing. So it's an easy switch. Let's start there, right? We can switch something like our cookware. We can start looking at our personal care items, like the flossers, like some of the products that we use, and ask ourselves, are there more sustainable options? Do I need this? And because sometimes the ideal for me, instead of necessarily switching, would be, can I just get rid of it completely? But that's my whole underconsumption thing. That's a whole other thing. But looking at options, right? Part of this is it will take a little bit on you as a consumer. There are some resources, but this is still something that you have to take sort of initiative on your own. To be like, what can I do in my house that makes sense for me and my family to try to reduce? Again, you're not likely going to eliminate it. We have to take it. We have to take this on from a regulatory perspective, but you can reduce the impact as much as humanly possible. Filter your drinking water. Again, we mentioned the filters that are more useful. Again, one of the challenges of those is they are expensive, right? That is a barrier for some people in some communities, which is another thing to keep in mind. Avoiding packaging that will contain these chemicals, particularly in food and food products. A great way to do that will also help you reduce your plastic footprint, is go to places that you can get products that are not wrapped, right? Shop local. Goodness gracious, you'd think it's a Friday, it's not. Shop local, right? Go to farmers markets. Go to places where you can get products that are going to be sustainable and that are going to be easily accessible without necessarily needing a ton of packaging. Educate others. That's what I'm here to do, and this is, I think, one of the key aspects of how we can actually make change, is more people need to know about this. A lot of people don't know about this. Again, 6 months ago, well, I guess it's a little bit more than 6 months now, but not that long ago, I was one of those people. And I view myself as someone who is pretty tapped in, pretty engaged, who cares about the environment, cares about people around me. I just didn't know about this. I genuinely had not heard, had not been exposed to this at all. There's hundreds, thousands, millions of people who are like that. Once they do know about it, though, it's going to be much easier for us to do something about it, because a lot more people are going to be making noise, right? And we also need to advocate for better water testing and better cleanup. One of the issues that we're having with the research is the lack of research, and is the lack of testing, and is the lack of comprehensive information to actually even know how bad the situation is, right? Because we talk about most of the water that's been tested has been found to have some amount, but not a ton of water has been tested. And not everywhere has any sort of regulations around testing. So we need to get much widespread testing so that we can actually get to a space where we know what we're working in, we know what the challenge is. The other issue is pushing businesses to be more sustainable and to move away from packaging that's coated in forever chemicals, right? Part of that is on us as consumers to push that pressure. Part of it is on us as organizers to go out and organize and get people to engage and motivated. But we really need to push businesses as well to be more sustainable. We need to support regulations that are coming through. We need to show that we are engaged and care, and this is an issue that matters to us, because that's exactly what will help us actually get these things moving. And we need to do things like what we're doing tonight, show up for things like this, right? This is where we build community, this is where we engage, this is where we learn, this is where we grow, and this is how we can continue to push stuff like this forward. At home, same exact things. So this is where you're going to sort of take a little bit into your own, what makes sense for you to reduce your exposure as much as possible. Again, it's up there, we've talked about it a little bit, I don't want to belabor the point too much. And because I work with Plastic Library, and this will sort of do a both and, moving away from plastics, right? A lot of single-use plastics are going to be coated in PFAS. That's just part of they're little toxic twins. And so moving away from single-use plastics is going to help reduce your exposure. That looks like glass containers, silicone bags, bamboo utensils, and just utensils that are much better for the environment, right? Silicone, interestingly enough, I had to look this up to make sure it wasn't coated in because it is already water, resistant, it doesn't need to be coated. So usually most silicone products will not have any PFAS chemicals. Just as a little, that was for me to check, because I was like, I want to make sure I'm not giving false information here. And just a little bit about what's happening in Pennsylvania. So there are some regulations that are in place to try to help protect the drinking water from the Department of Environmental Protection. We are testing here and detected and monitors for about 29 different types of PFAS, but keep in mind again, there's hundreds of these. So we still could do better. And the other issue with testing and some of these regulations is also the fact that, like, right now it's clear that no amount of PFAS in our water is safe. So when they talk about the safe limit, there is no safe limit. Any amount is toxic to us. So we don't want any amount, right? So that's really what we should be pushing for. But on the legislative side, we have Senator Muth, who is spearheading legislative efforts to ban PFAS chemicals in industrial applications and consumer goods. This is as of September. And then there's also, we're going to talk a little bit more about House Bill 2238 that was introduced by Representative Greg Scott, which would again look to ban PFAS in a broad range of products. And it's particularly looking at turf, cookware, carpeting, and baby products, which I thought was really cool. So I would love to have y'all get involved. You can go to the website, the Clean Water Action website. They have a petition on there that you can go ahead and log into that website, sign the petition. We were gonna create one, but then I was like, there's no need to be duplicative. We can just send y'all to one space and continue to sort of build the movement up. But that's really what's in the works right now and what we need support on. And so if you're looking to do something a little bit more than just on a personal level, and you're looking to push this to taking action, that would be what I would recommend. So as mentioned, this would be a broad product ban. It's not just a singular ban. It would be a broad ban, which is great. Covers new products that would be containing PFAS by 2033. And it has specifically laid out the turf, cookware, carpeting, and infant products, which again, I love. And you can get more involved by signing the petition and just essentially being part of the conversation, right? Because this is something we really want to push forward and make sure that it's being taken seriously. So, taking a step back, I want to tell you a little bit about the Plastic Collaborative and sort of, if y'all are interested, as people who care about plastics, as people who care about environment, as people who care about sustainability, the Plastic Collaborative is a coalition of community leaders, businesses, concerned citizens, and policymakers who are looking to reduce and eliminate single-use plastics in the greater Pittsburgh area. So we really just have a vision where we see a city that's free of single-use plastics, where communities are thriving, right? You mentioned the statistic about there being more plastic in the ocean than fish in not that long. And we don't want that. We don't want to see that reality. And we also don't want to see the reality that currently exists right now, where we're getting inundated with all the different plastic products that are harmful to not just our community, our environment, and our people, right? We see that it has impacts on our health, the microplastics that are getting everywhere, being found in different organs in our body, including the brain, which blew my mind. And so we want to do something about that. And that's what the collaborative is working towards. We are intentionally looking to be a space for people to come to have conversations. So we're not trying to posit ourselves as experts or necessarily to be like, we're here to tell you what to do, but it's about getting people who care and want to do something together to see what makes sense, what is doable, what is winnable, and how can we keep making incremental progress, right? So again, there's a connection here where if we reduce single-use plastics, we're gonna inherently, because again, they're the two toxic twins, there's gonna be a positive reduction of PFAS, and because they tend to, again, work in conjunction. And we've talked about how the health impact is similar, as well as the environmental focus for us is we want to sustainable world. And that looks like getting rid of single-use plastics, that looks like getting rid of forever chemicals, that looks like having a world that's healthy, clean, prosperous for all of us. Thank you so much. And before I close, I just want to do one thing. If you have a second and you can hop on your phone, I love to do this. So I like to have people, anytime I'm doing a talk or any sort of like engagement like this, to make a commitment, right? Because it's one thing to come and sit here and look at me and hear me talk, and it's another thing to be like, let me take something from this and like actually intentionally put it into work. And I found that when you do this, like when you actually write a pledge to do one thing, so DOT means do one thing. I'm not asking you to go save the world. I'm not asking you to go break down your senator's door or your congressman's door or whatever the case might be. I'm just asking you to pick one thing of any of the things that we've talked about, whether that's a personal action, whether that's a community level action, whether that's a legislative action, whatever the case might be, just pick one thing. You can click on the QR code, get on there, and write down your pledge. Let me know what you're going to do, right? That's part of it is like the accountability aspect of it. And just take one action that's going to help reduce your exposure and help protect our environment. Thank you all so much.
Hey, did everybody have a moment to scan the QR code before I begin? We good? Same thoughts. Okay, super. Let's go with that. Okay, it's working. Good evening. I'm Michelle Naparati-Takis with Women for a Healthy Environment, and our organization is a nonprofit located here in southwestern PA. We also have an office in Philly, and we really focus on the environmental exposures that impact public health. And we do that through three main programs: healthy homes, healthy schools, and healthy early learning centers, the child care spaces. And if you think about those three spaces, those are places where children spend their days. So we work in this space from a prenatal perspective all the way up to a child graduating from high school. And so we're working to really focus on that built environment and making those healthy spaces regardless of the type of toxin and toxic that we address. And so we really are a solution-based and solution-focused organization, and we're thinking about community and how we can go into that space and really create a healthy environment for all of the residents. And so I'll talk a little bit about PFAS and our experience with it over the last several years. I'll skip over some of my slides because you've heard about the health impacts and you've heard about where they're located, and so we don't have to drill in on any of that. But we'll talk a little bit more about the research, and I'll give you some stories about how we've been involved in this space. And I think one of the things that our organization had focused for many, many years on this federal regulation. So policy is really important, as we just heard. Thanks, Moses, for talking about what's going on at the state. At the local, state, and federal level, it's really important because from a regulatory perspective, that's where we're going to have change. And so certainly, it was known as the Toxic Substances Control Act that had been around since 1976. 85,000 plus chemicals have been introduced into the marketplace. Of those, how many do you think actually have been tested for safety? Anybody have any idea? 85,000 plus chemicals. 12. Well, gosh, this is a really pessimistic group, right? Well, it's not actually that far up. 200. I mean, out of those 85,000 plus chemicals, only 200 had been tested for safety with the EPA. And of those at that time, so this is a couple years ago, how many do you think actually had been regulated? So we had 12 before, so your hand is kind of close to that. 10, yeah, so it was only about six chemicals at that time. So crazy numbers, which is why policy is so critical in this space. So we worked on this thing called TSCA reform, and I'm happy to say that there was now the Chemical Safety Act of the 21st century after Senator Frank Lautenberg that finally did pass. So we had good stuff happening. But it really was looking at some of the things of how we can identify classes of chemicals. And so as you're talking about PFAS, it's this class of chemicals, and you hear about these acronyms all associated with it. PFOA, PFAS, GenX, C8. I mean, all of these are kind of in this big lump of per and polyfluoral chemicals that you hear about. And so that's why it's really important in the Chemical Safety Act of the 21st century, looked at how we can identify and really regulate classes of chemicals instead of this piecemeal approach. And so those are some of the things that are underway right now, and that was a good success. Many more things, though, that need to be done. So we really were focusing on that because at that same time, all of this energy was around TSCA reform, was the story of Parkersburg, West Virginia. And so that's then the story that we heard about with Rob Willott. Really, has anybody seen Dark Waters? One or two. I encourage you all to go watch Dark Waters. It was really done well, and it's factually accurate. In fact, the attorney Rob Willott, who this story is about, as the attorney who brought forth and sued the big chemical companies who are the manufacturers of PFAS, it's his journey and his success story that happened. And so it's so well done that actually he has a cameo in it. So it has his blessing as he appears in it, because they work so closely. Mark Ruffalo plays Rob Willott. And so he spoke at an event that we had that was slated for 2020. And so if all of you know what happened in 2020, our speaker then kind of went virtual all of a sudden, and he did a fabulous job. It was as compelling as he would be in person, virtually through a Zoom event. But he's really has an amazing story. So Dark Waters, I encourage you all to go watch it. But that, his journey began in 1999 with this exposure. And so I'm happy to report, I just pulled up on my phone because I want to get the number right. This is a really big one. So, that settlement began in 2018, and in 2020 then, there was the settlement that was finalized between all of the parties. The big companies, DuPont paid $39 million of the $110 million lawsuit. Chemours paid half of the settlement, and then another company called Corteva paid the rest. $110 million. And, when we talk about health impacts, this really got played out in court, because then a medical registry was created for all of the residents of Parkersburg, West Virginia, who were impacted by the C8 chemical. And so, that is really how this story really came into mainstream media just over the last, maybe 5 or 8 years or so. So a lot of things have happened in that regard, and in particular in water space, which is really important to hear and learn about, because it's happening in our own backyard. And I'll tell you some stories about what's happening in our own backyard a little bit too. So here we are, 3 rivers, Ohio, Allegheny, and Monongahela, 15 PFAS. So let's talk about why that happened and what do we know. We had an environmental health research fellow who came to us in the summer of 22. And she came from Michigan, and Michigan, frankly, is doing a lot of good stuff related to water quality regulations, and a good place for us to model. And they had, and her dad worked with the wastewater treatment industry, and so that's why she had such an interest in PFAS. And she said, I'm going to go out on the rivers. I said, all right, let's do it. I said, how are you going to get on the rivers? Well, I'm going to kayak it. I kept thinking, all right, does our insurance company cover this? We never put anybody in a river. Fortunately, it did, but then she worked with colleagues at the Three Rivers Waterkeeper who helped her to navigate some of the areas along the river. And so her goal was really to look at where she wanted to collect. So in Allegheny County, we've got some work to do about regionalization. We've got 36 water systems, and we've got about as many water treatment plants. And so that's a lot for one county in terms of management. But she wanted to get a random sampling of these two, on the 3 rivers, to really get a sense of, if she collected water, what types of PFAS and what amount would she find? And so what she did was, here's our slide. I'll move on because we know that. She wanted to think about how this particular source could be impacting our health. And so this way. So here we are and looking at how PFAS enters into our environment, into our homes. So as you see, there are so many multiple sources along the way. There are PFAS polluted facilities, as you heard, starting off with the very first conversation of today. And then we certainly know there's the wastewater treatment plants. We have landfills because certainly everything that we're throwing out contains PFAS and it's ending up in our landfills and leaching into our soil and waterways. Our homes and offices, you just heard Moses talk about the consumer products and all the things that PFAS is in. Our soil and farmland, pesticides. Pesticides contain PFAS. And so as we are using pesticides on our lawn, and as that gets washed down the drain, guess where it's ending up? And then certainly now we're seeing it in terms of our drinking water, infiltrating into our groundwater, and firefighting foam. Remind me to tell you that story. So, this is one of the various places where we know that it has been infiltrating our health and our environment. So here are the exposure routes. You heard a little bit about that earlier. Ingestion, skin absorption, and inhalation, with ingestion being the primary source as it relates to drinking water. Here are the health effects that we talked about earlier. A whole bunch of things that have been cited. There's a lot of now scientific studies that back all of this up. And more work to be done. So let's talk about what happened in 2021. There's a fire in McKeesport. It's at the auto body shop. They're having trouble putting out that fire. A lot of volunteer firefighting companies come together. And so they ask for backup. And so they have now a hazmat team come in to help put out that fire. So as they're doing that, they're hooking up their hoses to the fire hydrants. It's improperly connected. It backflows into the water system. So now they have to shut down the water. This is in the municipal authority of Westmoreland County. And so as a result, at least they knew what had happened and they were able to quickly shut down the system. But in the meantime, there's, we know it's a firefighting foam that was used here. And it's likely to have something called AFFF, which is the PFAS contaminant in firefighting foam. So they had to take extreme caution to test and see if that firefighting foam in particular was AFFF and had the PFAS chemical. Sure thing it did. So what they did was they went to door and they told the residents that they were not going to have access to water. It ended up being 3 weeks later that they had still no access to water. So they were having those residents go out up to the high school for everything from bathing to filling up containers to send back and putting water buffaloes in communities so they would have some type of water to use. So with all that said, we were thinking, what is happening and what's the conversation with residents throughout this process? Turns out there really wasn't a whole lot of communication. And the residents were complaining, saying they just weren't hearing from their electeds and from the municipal authority. There had been no community conversations. There were no convenings. And we were like, this is not right. Oh, and of course, it was the poorest ward in McKeesport. So our team said, we have these water filters because we had a lead crisis a couple of years ago. And we mobilized and distributed thousands of these water filters that remove lead in drinking water. And we're like, wonder if that would work for the PFAS. And so we're called the company Zero Water. They're great. I get no money for saying they're great. They're just really great. And so we said, Zero Water, we have this incident. We've got access to these water filters. Do you think we could get them out to the community and they would actually remove the PFAS? And they said, well, it just turns out that actually they do. And they could stand behind it and certify. And so we were like, okay, let's do it. So we called PWSA, we got a truck, we loaded it up. This is real grassroots effort, right? And then we come down with hundreds and hundreds of these water filters and start distributing them at the church in the 10th ward, working with the folks at the church who use and offer their space as well for community convenings. And so we set up a tent and really started distributing these water filters to anybody who needed it, and went door to door to find who was available and who didn't have access, in terms of disabilities and such. And we're distributing these water filters, and we thought this is the best we can do right now in the time that we need, because the concern was, and we started working then with a professor, Dr. Carla Engie at Pitt, who actually is a PFAS expert. So when you talk about experts, she's the expert. So she has a whole research lab on PFAS down at the University of Pittsburgh. And so she then was quickly able to get an NIH grant to say, we are going to need to do some further studies here. Because the concern was, how much time will have to elapse and flushing those lines for the PFAS to go away. And so her immediate concern was, what if this PFAS, because we know the qualities that we talked about, water resistant, stain resistant, what if it sticks to the inside of the pipes and it doesn't necessarily go away all that quickly? And so we mobilized with her and her team of graduate students and then started going door to door for a period of months and took water samples. She would take them back to the lab at Pitt and test them. And so then we were able to show, yes, there's PFAS and it's still here. Continue to use your water filter. And oh, by the way, Carla, can you take that filter and test it too? Because we really just want to make sure that it's working. And sure enough, it does, because she pulled out the filter, they tested all of it, and found all the PFAS contaminated in the filter. So it was working as it should in that particular situation. So we were able then to continue to collect water samples over time to be able to really see if there would be a decrease in concentration. And over the next 2 years then of working in community, we were able to find that. And so we're in a better place now, I'm happy to report. But in the meantime, the Municipal Authority of West Orange County sued the bigs. So it's the bigs are Chemours, DuPont, and 3M, because they're the manufacturers of PFAS. And it's really hard to trace exactly where that PFAS from which chemical company that would come from. So they just went, well, you sue them all. So they really went after those companies, and that's still in litigation. And our argument going in front of the board at the Municipal Authority is that if you should be able to be successful in that lawsuit, that money has to come. Now, it's going to go back into their plant and their facilities, we get it, but it also has to come back to the community. I mean, they're the ones who suffer the most. So we've been advocating that should they be successful in that litigation, then the community really does have to benefit from that. Same thing happened in Coriopolis and Moon Township. They too had a PFAS contamination, sued the chemical companies, and then won and put it in a reinvestment into their system, their water system. So they have it at a point of entry. They have a filtration system in their wastewater treatment plant the drinking water plant at Moon Township. So the Moon Coriopolis Water Authority then ensures that they're actually filtering for PFAS right now. Which will help them whenever we get to some compliance issues, and we can talk about federal regulations. So let's get back to this PFAS research project. We tested for the contamination from the effluent in the 3 rivers. So we looked at, you can see this map is coming up here. That was Morgan, by the way, our wonderful environmental health fellow. So we took points along these 3 rivers, and there are wastewater treatment plants at each of these points. So we looked at the McKeesport wastewater treatment plant, the Allegheny County Sanitary Authority, ALCOSAN, and also then up along the Allegheny Valley, which is the Allegheny Valley Joint Sewage Authority. So we took samples, one upstream, so about 15 meters upstream, and then in what's known as the mixing zone. And so it's the effluent where the outfall combines with the river. And so you'll see it's basically where the river comes, or where the outflow comes out and meets the river. It looks like a little mini waterfall. And so our procedure here was to, after many steps we would take to mitigate the risk of outside contamination, working with Dr. Carla to ensure no contamination of our samples, we collected these samples with an HGP bottle, here we are, plastic, yes, below the surface interface, and then we poured it into what's known as the cyclopore test kit. And then we, after returning to shore, we waited for the sample to filter through this little pad and really worked on the PFAS extraction there. So, and we had quality control throughout that process. Now our overall findings, I want to go to that. Here are the results. Stark increases in the number of PFAS detected from the upstream sample to the mixing zone collection. So here's a picture that you can see of all of the 3 water treatment plants that we sampled, and where this PFAS detection is in parts per trillion in upstream versus the mixing zone. In the mixing zone, a drastic increase every time. So, no, it's all good, is it? So, increases in the total PFAS in parts per trillion from the upstream sample to the mixing zone. And here again is now the total PFAS collected. And so when we talk about that, it's all of those different chemicals, those different chemical detections of, because we know there are lots of different PFAS. So in terms of concentration and type, we find both an increase in both of those situations. So increases in the number of PFAS and the total concentration of PFAS were detected in these mixing zones. 2 of them had exceeded the maximum contaminant level in drinking water. There were a total of 15 different PFAS compounds detected. So this confirms that wastewater treatment plants are a major source of PFAS contamination, and that we must take the initiative. And so we've been looking at the Michigan law to really look at that as an introduction at the state level. But in the meantime, there's been some good news that has happened from a regulatory perspective that we can talk about as well. So putting our findings into perspective, essentially what is getting washed down our drains is entering into our river systems because these wastewater treatment plants don't have the filtration necessary to be able to remove the PFAS. These are the results, again, of 3 of the 24 wastewater treatment plants. When I said 36 water authorities that regulate drinking water, 24 wastewater treatment plants. And this is only one waste stream. As you saw earlier, this map, we're revisiting this map again. This is only one of those waste streams and doesn't account for this cumulative effect and cumulative impact in terms of our health and exposure. So there are many complex pathways for PFAS getting into the environment, and we've shown that here today. So from this work, we had a couple of recommendations for both state and federal policy. And one is to regulate PFAS as a class of chemical in this particular situation as it relates to water, to avoid these harmful substitutions. And that happened with BPA. Like BPA gets removed, and then we get BPS, which is just as harmful and has just as many of the same similar chemicals as BPA and impacts to health. We require the wastewater treatment plants to monitor and determine the sources of environmental contamination of PFAS and to invest in sustainable chemistry. Right at CMU, we've got an amazing Greek chemistry institute, and so we want more efforts and research to be going into those spaces. State policy prohibit the sale and distribution of PFAS in consumer products. California and Washington State always leading the way, protecting the rest of the country. They have passed pretty stringent PFAS regulatory and consumer product policies, and so as a result, you're going to have manufacturers who aren't going to change their formulation for what they're going to sell in California and Washington. It just won't behoove them from a business perspective, and so the formulations will change. We will reap the benefits, but there will be some things that could slip through the cracks, and so we absolutely should have a PFAS and consumer product bill at the state level as well, just to have double, triple, quadruple protection to ensure that we can, address these things like cosmetics. And I want to just briefly talk about cosmetics because it's part of the work that our organization does. So cosmetics and personal care products is kind of a crazy, crazy space. If you think about that, there's a regulatory when we ask about when laws were written, does anybody happen to know when the laws were written that got your personal care products and cosmetics? Anybody want to throw out a year? 1970. And that's a good guess because that's Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, TSCA was in 1976, a lot of stuff was happening in the 70s. Yeah. Anybody else? Thoughts? Okay, 1938, and it was literally about 2 or 3 pages of a regulation. A little crazy. Oftentimes you hear about the fox guarding the henhouse. But what happened was another thing. Organizations such as ours and other environmental health organizations across the country said, this is not right. And so there was a bill passed in 2021, and it's the modernization. I want to make sure I get the name of it right. But it has to do with the modernization of the Cosmetic and Personal Care Act. It's something like that. It's a long name. But it's doing much better, and it's now looking at PFAS very specifically in cosmetics and personal care products to get more data, more scientific studies, and more reporting of it. So a good bill, we're working incrementally in these spaces, but it's progress for sure. I'm looking at time here, so I want to make sure I wrap up. If I can get my, there we go. So consumer recommendations, Moses covered, we don't have to spend any time here. PFAS is everywhere. Consumer product safety is really key. Swapping out for some of these simple things we can do, as it relates to your cookware. You already heard about food and I gave a talk at Westminster College earlier this fall, and I feel so bad that we're talking about PFAS to students in college because they all have microwaves in their dorms and they all love the popcorn. I'm like, you gotta stop it. It's just buy the already popped in a bag. It's gonna be so much better and safer for you. Okay, so with that, I think I'll stop because I think we're running probably pretty close on time. So with that, I will end, and I'll give you probably just a few minutes for some Q&A. How's that?
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
A minute, as we can stretch, we'll collect.
Small enough to get into our bloodstream. They're absorbed through our intestines. We'll breathe them in and they get absorbed through the lungs. And some people even through the skin. And what happens with the microplastics, these small particles, I mentioned before that you can see them in every organ that they test. Pathologists now are looking and they're finding microplastics and nanoplastics, very small plastics, that get lodged in our organs. And when they do, that's really where you have that time release effect of the chemicals and slowly releasing the chemicals into the body. And that's really dangerous because these chemicals work in very, very low concentrations as endocrine disruptors. It doesn't take much. In fact, you may have heard the term, the dose makes the poison. But in this case, it's the timing that makes the poison. Child development, fetal development occurs along a very strict timeline. And it's a very exact thing. And the hormones, which work at parts per trillion, just very, very small amounts, they orchestrate everything. So when the embryo develops into organs and the organs move into the proper place and a normal baby is born, that it's really just very exquisite timing. And endocrine disrupting chemicals coming from microplastics really disturbs that and disrupts that. And it causes all sorts of problems in child development, fetal development, child development, and so forth. One other way that microplastics affect us is physically. There was a study that came out earlier this year looking at a plaque in carotid artery blockages. And what it found was about half of the patients had microplastics and nanoplastics in the plaque, actually causing a blockage of the carotid artery. And it found that those people that had that had a much higher risk of developing stroke, heart attacks, and premature death in the 3 years following the study. So it really it's a major problem, these microplastics. And it clearly, I think what we need to do from a plastic perspective is we need to collect them all and we need to bury them in carefully designed landfills and get them away from humans and really evolving forms.
Okay, great, we got lots of good questions. All right, so I've got, does boiling H2O affect PFAS levels? Anybody wants to tackle that?
Well, if that's what they're asking.
Yeah.
No, so boiling water does not remove PFAS. In fact, boiling water, that's often a question that comes up in lead, in drinking water too. So the thought and the notion is that if I boil it, I'll remove all those contaminants, including PFAS, including lead. Actually, in some instances, you're actually increasing the risk and exposure. And so cold water, always for food preparation, formula preparation and such. And the only way you're going to get rid of it is if you filter it, and you want to look for an NSF certified water filter. And so pure, P-U-R water filter and zero water are two of those. You can go to Target, you can go to Home Depot, Walmart, etc. and buy off the shelf. Brita has just changed their filtration over the last probably year and a half or so. And so now I believe they also do have an NSF certified pitcher as well. They didn't before, but more recently now I believe there's one on the shelf that you can buy. So all three of those are good ones to buy if you're in the market.
Okay. We've got thinking about reduction of PFAS chemicals at home. Is it law in Pennsylvania for companies to disclose the presence of PFAS in products or their packaging? No, not yet.
Nope.
Would you repeat that
No,
question?
the consumer has to be the detective, unfortunately. You've got to, so we're trying to, provide as much information as possible. And when I talked about the Modernization Cosmetic Act of 2022, it's looking for anything that has fluoro, F-L-O-U-R-O, in the ingredients. So they're usually like 5-syllable words that you can't pronounce, and you don't know what the heck it's saying. But on that type of packaging, in particular with consumer product safety, deodorant, soap, shampoo, etc., try and find something that does not have that fluoro in the ingredient. But no, you're on your own right now, unfortunately. But through education and programming such as this, and you going out and sharing with others, that's one way. But also, I do want to say that consumer demand changes the marketplace. It absolutely does. So we are part of a national movement with some other organizations, and we have been able to, there's a retailer report card that just came out that we'll be putting on our website. Our website's undergoing a refresh, but we'll get it out there. But essentially what we all did collectively across the country is work on the manufacturers and the companies that sell these products too. And so as a result, with PFAS, we know that, stain resistant, water resistant. So thinking about that in your outdoor stores, your Dick's and your REI, there's camping gear that all contains PFAS, your rain gear, etc., your boots and such. So because of consumer demand and really pushing for these companies to make change, Dick's and REI said, okay, we're going to sign the pledge and we are actually going to not carry any products anymore that contain PFAS. Now it'll take them some time to implement that because they have to phase out what their product is that they've got on the shelf. But by the year 2026, they won't be selling any product that contains PFAS. So that's also where you have the power in terms of your pocketbook to make change as well. And, and companies are being responsive to it. That's the good news.
The only thing I would add is just remember again, it's water resistant, stain resistant, heat resistant. So it's a lot of things, but just keep it when you're thinking through your products, if it's something that would potentially benefit or from something like that, go ahead and do a quick Google and you probably will find an answer about whether or not it contains.
Like your carpeting, right? When you sell carpet, when you buy carpeting, it is stain resistant. Anything that says stain resistant.
Exactly. All right, I want to be mindful of time. We have a lot of great questions. So I think we'll finish with one more question, and then if it's okay with you guys, maybe I'll collect answers to some of these other questions, and we can distribute via email just so everyone can get home tonight. So the last question is, given the current incoming administration, what is the best way to impact our state and local policies to ban PFAS chemicals? Do we have this power?
Well, yes. So just to start off there, the power is always with people, and this is something I feel really strongly about. At the end of the day, it is we the people, right? And but to get there, we need to be educated and united, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm really pushing for, if you have this knowledge, talk to your friends, talk to your people. The more people we get who are up in arms, engaged, active, the more chances and the more we can really put people in our position to be able to really advocate for these things, and to be able to say we have the numbers behind us, right? Because unfortunately, at the end of the day, elected officials, if they support us or they don't support us, they look at those numbers. And if you can tell them, hey, the community is really up in arms about this, and we can show, everybody signed this petition, everybody came to this event, everybody's talked, people are asking these questions, we're much more likely to get change. And I'm never going to be a negative Nancy when it comes to stuff like this. I do think we can make a change. I don't think this is something where it is overwhelming, right? We're not going to pretend it's not. It is an overwhelming reality when you're oh my gosh, just about everything around me has these toxic chemicals. But we have had change before, right? We have seen pressure from the public make an impact on a business level, make an impact on a policy level, and just overall make change. So definitely we can make change regardless of who is in power, as long as we, the people, are engaged and activated.
Standards for the first time in over 20 years. And what this regulation update was around PFAS. And so it finally put together a very specific maximum contaminant level for PFAS in drinking water. Now that means that all of the water systems across Allegheny County will have to comply and put in their consumer confidence reports. They'll have to test, and they'll have to inform you about PFAS in drinking water. So these consumer confidence reports coming out, Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority already has started putting that in their CCR. Other water systems will do it as well. But that was that federal regulation was more stringent than our state law. And so that's why it was really, really good. Now, I was on a call today because that law passed just this October. The lead and copper rule improvements had passed, and these were all federal regulations that we were working really hard for a number of years on to get passed. And so if there is a congressional review, and if there is a rollback on those, I think that this is a good opportunity. Those bills are written, and they're good bills to model. And so if that does happen, I think we have to lean in on the state and then go to our state legislators and say, this is an opportunity. We had this protection 5 months ago, and if we lose it, let's go to the state level and get these bills passed.
Excellent. Okay, great. Two things. Good news on the popcorn, because I have a glass popcorn maker that goes in the microwave. It's got a silicone top, so it should be good, and it makes great popcorn. So. Me too, absolutely. And then wonderful questions. Thank you. Yes.
There is a problem also with the butter thing that they put in the popcorn.
Oh,
That's where the problem is.
Oh, right. You mean in the bag popcorn too? Yeah, the butter.
It's not only the plastic, it's the
butter also.
flavor.
Okay. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You can use a plain paper bag too. That's
So
great.
use
Yeah.
regular butter for you to take.
Regular butter. That's
Perfect.
Exactly.
True.
Great. Yeah. And my only other thing, if you do want the answers to these questions, make sure you sign up in the back to get our email. So we'll compile, and I would be happy to email this to you. So thank you, and I'm going to bring Susan up to close us out. Thank you very much.
Sorry we didn't have a longer for panel, but Sam and I decided not to ask the speakers to stop talking because I think the information we received was super important and great. And now Sam has solved the problem of how we get everybody's questions answered. But I think one of the things that all of our minds that's come up is how do we know if there's PFAS and all these other thousands of forever chemicals in the consumer products that we're using in eating, buying for our children and grandchildren, et cetera. And I just wanted to point this out. The reason that slide is up there, you can't read it, I know, but it was just a reminder for me to tell you that there's an organization called the Environmental Working Group. And if you go on the back table there's a QR code, and it'll take you to their link. And they have consumer guides. They have tons of information about plastic and PFAS and forever chemicals, and they have consumer guides that'll tell you what's good and what's not. And then also you can put an app on your phone. So like I got the app, I went around my house, just checked my shampoo, and toothpaste, and it tells you what's in it, if it's on the registry, because they're in the process of adding things and researching things. What's in it, and they have a risk scale, a colored risk scale. If I go shopping and I want to buy something, I want to buy blush for my face, I can put the barcode on my app, and it'll tell me the safety level of that. So I really want to share that. I found this is a marvelous tool. There are probably other tools out there for us to use.
I can send you a list of that if you want to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, and also there's a QR code for an organization called Beyond Plastics. I think that's also a really great resource to learn more about plastic pollution and all the chemicals that are associated with them. And then when we email you the answers to questions, we'll also have the addresses to the website of all these organizations. That's the Environmental Healthcare Project, Dr. Ned Ketcher, and Moses Wamula, from the Plastic
Plastics Collaborative.
Collaborative, and then we've got Michelle from Women for Healthcare Environment. So those are the three organizations, so keep an eye on them, just Google. They are also packed with information on these topics, as well as fracking, the Shell cracker plant down in Monaco, which is making all of us really angry. So